So in this video, we're going to talk about how to dockerize or containerize your Spring Boot application. And I hope you already have Docker installed in your machine. And if you don't have Docker, you can download it from the official website. The first thing is that we want to create a single executable Uber jar, and Spring Boot automatically does this for us by using Spring Boot Maven plugin, so we don't have to worry much about that. And the second thing is that we're going to create a Docker file. Docker file is kind of like a blueprint which holds a set of instructions to build your Docker image. And the next thing is that we are going to build our Docker image, and finally we're going to run our project in a Docker container. So those are the four basic steps we're going to follow. Before proceeding further, I want to highlight that the steps we're going to follow today are very basic. I'm sure there are advanced ways to dockerize our application, but today I want to show you the very basic and the easy way to quick start your dockerization. So alright, so let me create a Spring Boot application. So I'm going to create a very basic Spring Boot project, and I'm going to give my artifact name as wire or help, and I'm going to go with the very basic Spring Web application. Now let me open my demo application file. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to quickly add in a simple REST API. So let me copy paste some code. So alright, we have our basic API, and the second thing I want to show you is that if you go to your pom.xml, you should be able to see something like Spring Boot Maven plugin, and this Spring Boot Maven plugin is responsible for creating that single executable Uber jar. And so after building this project, you should be able to see that jar in this target directory. I'm going to build my project, so I'm going to say run as maven build, and I'm going to say clean compile install skip tests and make sure that it's JDK. All right, now I'm going to run my project, and after building your project, you should be able to see your jar in target directory. Now let me do a refresh here. You can see that there's an jar created, and the good thing about this jar is that I can run this web application just like a console application. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to go to this jar location, and I'm going to open my command prompt, and I can run this jar file now. Let's say java hyphen jar. Let me copy that name and dot jar. So let me run it. You can see that it's printing some Spring Boot logs, and you can see that it's running on localhost 8080. Now let me go to my port localhost 8080. Now the reason why I'm showing this, because in order to make this application dockerize, all I have to do is that I have to move this jar file to the respective Docker image, and the Docker container will take care of the rest. Alright, so that's about creating a single executable jar. Now the second thing is that I'm going to create a Docker file, and I'm going to go to my root directory, and I'm going to create a Docker file. So I'm going to copy a few lines of code here, and let me explain what these lines mean. And the first line says from OpenJDK something, and it means that we are building our image, Docker image, from the base image OpenJDK. So we are taking OpenJDK as a parent image, and we are building on top of that. And the second thing is that we are using volume. So this volume is needed for Spring Boot application, because Tomcat will internally try to create a work folder or the work setup inside this volume. And the third one is very straightforward. So what we're doing is that we are adding our jar, which is inside our target location, to the Docker image in the name of app.jar. And I think I have to change my jar name here. I guess it should be wire or help. and the fourth line is our entry point for our application to run. So if you remember previously what we did was so to run our application we ran java jar our jar name, and this is what we are doing here as well. So we are giving instructions to docker on how to run this application. So that's about creating a docker file, and finally we're going to build our docker image. So to build your docker image, what you could do is that you could go to your location, docker file location, and open a command prompt. And so we're going to use docker commands here. So before proceeding further, make sure that your docker setup is up and running, and if you want to cross check you can say docker version. So it should give you a proper docker version, and if it's not working make sure that your setup is proper. All right, now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to say docker build, so which is used to build our image from the docker file. And I'm going to give a tag to my container as, let's say, yrr help demo, and make sure that it's all lowercase, and if you try to use uppercase it will throw an error. And finally I'm going to use dot, so which means so this is the docker file location. So currently it's in the present directory, so I'm just giving dot, and I'm going to run. Now when you're running this for the first time it might take some time to download all the parent image files. Now next thing is that if you want to see whether your image is built successfully, what you could do is that you could go to docker and say docker image ls. It should list all the available images in your docker machine. Now the first thing you are looking at is yrr help demo, which is what we built now, and you can see it's created 44 seconds ago. That's it, you have built your docker image successfully. And the fourth and main step is that we have to run a docker container, and we have to make our application up and running. Now for this what we have to do is that we have to say docker run and your image name. Now before that you have to do a port mapping. The reason because your application is running in a some kind of virtual environment, and when you try to access from your host machine, it might not work. So for that you have to do a port mapping from your host machine to the docker machine. So for that all you have to do is that -p 8080 8080. So what you're doing is that you are mapping your docker 8080 port to your host machine, that is your local machine port. Now if you want you can change this to anything you want. Now when I run this one, what happens is that docker will create a new container and it will start our application or start the container. All right. Alright, it's saying that bind has been failed. That's because our local process is still running. So let me kill this one. And in this scenario, you could try with a different port like 7070. It might work. Now let me rerun this. Alright, you can see that your application is running now. Now when I go to my browser and when I try to refresh, it should give some response. Alright, it's actually giving the response from the docker machine. So that's pretty much about how you dockerize your application. Now if you want to stop the container, all you have to do is that so first you have to get the container ID. So let me show you how to get that. Docker ps. So docker ps will give you all the running containers. I have only one container up and running, so let me copy this one. Docker container stop and pass your container ID. Now this will stop my container. Now when I go to my host machine and when I try to refresh, I won't get the proper response. Now, if you want to start again, don't try to run docker run. That's because if you try to run docker run, it will create a new container. You don't want that. What you have to do is that you have to start an existing container. So in order to start an existing container, the same thing, you have to do docker start and your container ID. And in case if you don't know your container ID, all you have to do is that docker ps, and it won't list anything. It won't list your doc containers. The reason, because docker ps will show you only running or active containers, and if you want to list the containers which are not running, you have to use docker ps slash a, sorry, hyphen a or something. Now this will list you all the containers including running and not running. Now you can see that I have two containers with or help demo. So let me take this one, the first one, and let me run it again. So you have to use docker container start, and as I said, if you try to use docker run, it will create a new container instead of starting an existing one. So let me run this one again, docker start. Alright, now my application is running, and if you want to cross check, go to your local host and say, alright, now I'm getting the response. So that's pretty much about how you dockerize. Now, as I said, this is pretty straightforward and a very basic simple one. I just want to give you a quick heads up on this one. So thanks for viewing, guys. Don't forget to subscribe us and stay tuned.